your favorite Grasslands PR team. Today, we're back with another episode of The Best Biome, where we take a look at the underappreciated and overlooked aspects of grasslands.
Which we believe, personally, are the best biome.
Yes, obviously.
And we hope to convince you as well, dear listener. I'm Alan.
I'm Nicole.
I'm Rachel. Hey, guys.
Perfect. It only took 5 minutes for us to figure out how to properly open this podcast. And I want to say there's some really positive energy just crackling in the air right now because we're about to talk about birds.
A bird that I think is pretty stinking cool. It only lives in grasslands and it has a lot of fascinating ancient history, which is like one of my favorite topics.
Ancient history.
Yeah.
Wow.
So buckle up because today we're learning about the Seriema.
Seriema,
Which is a group of birds.
Mm-hmm.
There are 2 Seriemas in the world.
Oh.
Seriemas.
Yes.
Singular. Seriema, plural.
What?
Let's move on.
I don't know. Look, there's a group of birds. They are called Seriemas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I fucking know. Look.
Believe it or not, it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and not 3 a.m.
This is big 3 a.m. energy. Though.
We're doing good. All right.
Okay.
Yes.
So, the word Seriema refers to both 2 individual birds and also the group of birds. They're just called Seriemas.
Okay.
Seriemas. And they are ecologically very similar to the secretary bird.
Oh.
Do you guys know what a secretary bird is? Pop quiz time, go.
Yes.
Alan?
Secretary birds, they are very leggy.
It's true.
Very tall, sort of like
Eyelashes.
eyelashy.
They
Yeah.
have beautiful eyelashes.
Yes. They're sort of like almost like a ground-based sort of like raptor. Like they grab snakes, they just kick the heck out of them to death, and then they eat them. And they have like I believe we talked about them briefly on this podcast.
I think so. I don't remember what episode.
Me either.
About how they got like just they can get bit by snakes all day.
Yeah.
And they're fine.
That's the thing.
Because there's just really no like minimal circulatory system in their legs.
Right. Yeah, that's the one. Okay. Yeah. Yep. So secretary bird is an African species. And like you said, it's a leggy murder bot. And basically, the Seriema is the South American ecological equivalent to the secretary bird. They are not related species. They do have some convergent features, like their beautiful, luscious eyelashes. That is also a trait that the Seriema has.
Nice.
So you can kind of picture this bird. Like I said, there's 2 different species of Seriema. There's the black-legged and the red-legged Seriema. They're very similar. They're also honestly not super well studied compared to other species, which is just a component of our rich colonial history in the world and the fact that a lot of South American species have gone unstudied for many decades and didn't get studied until they arrived in zoos, for example, up in like Western areas, quote unquote. Yeah, that's just a feature, not a bug of what's gone on here with this animal. So some of the data we have today is fairly new, and some of it goes way back.
Whoa.
In time.
Ancient history, as you said.
So if you haven't seen one of these birds, I'll describe the red-legged one to you. They're very similar. They have long legs. They are capable of flight. They don't fly very much. They primarily run around on the ground. And the red-legged Seriema has a sort of, it's not a crest, but they are long plumes at the front of the face, like between the beak and the forehead or the eyes, that can raise up for display purposes. And you're more likely to see it. yeah, picture a secretary bird or like a very leggy turkey just kind of walking around eating eating snacks off the ground, basically. Yeah. They are omnivorous, and they are some of the largest ground-dwelling birds endemic to the neotropics. The only group of birds that's larger than the Seriemas are rheas.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that's big. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are among the largest birds in the neotropics for ground-dwelling birds. And they are a hunting bird that specializes in killing snakes and lizards, like our secretary bird friend. And here's where it gets kind of weird, because this little bird is the only surviving cousin to terror birds.
Oh, okay.
And so they have some really unique in the world today features that are shared only by terror birds in the past. And, some bird groups are susceptible to gigantism. This is one of them. So even though the Seriema is a pretty small bird, like the lineage that they belong to is enormous and gets up into like the 10-foot tall range of like horrifying animals. So pretty cool. Also, it is the only truly cursorial, which means running, bird predator, in that it like needs to chase down its prey. So it has some interesting features in that aspect too. I don't know why the secretary bird isn't considered to be like a true cursorial predator, since that's my perception of them. Maybe they're more strong flyers. Maybe they don't chase down their prey, or that's not like a necessary part of their ecology or physiology. But because of this feature, it makes this bird a really interesting comparison to a lot of extinct early birds and avian dinosaurs, because most of those ancient birds or bird-like animals were also cursorial. And so some of the features that we see in a Seriema could be convergently evolved to fulfill that cursorial, like ground-based predator aspect.
Nice.
For example, the extensible sickle claw that it has like a velociraptor.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. The kind that Dr. Alan Grant wore around his neck on a necklace.
Indeed, yes. With one slice. Eviscerate you, etc. Yeah. So pretty unique bird and a grasslands endemic. So let's talk about them first. And then I'm going to tell you about terror birds.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to tell you about like baby murder probably.
Sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Great.
That's part of it.
So the sort of habitat this animal lives in, as you might imagine, is really open. It is typical grasslands, but they sort of fill the ecological range of like pure plains up into like just open woodlands, basically. So savannas, grassland, all grassland types in South America. And they're in the area of Brazil and Argentina and a couple of other countries around that area. Like I said, they are capable of flight. They have a keel and everything. They are not strong flyers, though. You're much more likely to see them on the ground. And when they do fly, it's probably more like little short bursts to get up into a tree to roost or to get up into their nests. They do nest in trees. Or sometimes even to escape predators. But honestly, for this animal, it's more likely to run away if possible. It would only, in desperation, attempt to fly to get away from a predator. It's more likely to go speedy fast.
Yeah.
How fast can they go?
I just realized I didn't know.
Wow.
How fast is
Speedy.
that?
What's your guess?
That's faster than I thought.
30 miles an hour.
Dang, 25.
Up to 40.
Dang, that is fast.
Yeah.
That's quite quick. Yeah.
Very fast. That's actually the same statistic I had for terror birds, which is crazy.
Oh.
Maybe I'm getting them mixed up. Hang on. It's a bad look to have to Google things while I'm recording. God, yeah. Okay, so it looks like most species of terror birds were more aligned with like 30 miles an hour. But there's, I mean, that's a huge group, so there's a lot of variation in there, and especially size variation and stuff. So yeah, Seriema is a really fast animal, obviously, and really at home on the ground. So one of the things that makes this animal the most unique is the way that it murders things.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Have you guys seen, I know you have, Nicole, have you seen a Seriema murder something?
I believe, because I have seen like I've seen videos of like Seriema enrichment in zoos, and I believe it involves, they basically punch something to death with their face. Like it's pretty spectacular to watch. But yeah, they just like and pick it up and like throw it down, and like, because they'll pick up the little ball and then they'll like and then chuck it on the ground, like body slam it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
And that's one of their natural behaviors. So, you know, they're trained to do that in the sense that they're trained to do their natural behavior on cue, and they will chuck anything, a rubber alligator, like a rubber snake, whatever. And that is the characteristic thing about both Seriemas and terror birds that makes them exceptionally unique in the bird world, because their bodies are built for that like really sharp up and down, almost hatchet-like movement. And there's really nothing else in the bird world, at least, that does that. I know we're thinking like, oh, well, woodpeckers, I guess, like drum, but that's a very different locomotion than what we're talking about. Sure. And this is meant exclusively for, like Alan said, punching animals with their faces and chucking them at the ground. So, yeah, it's an extremely unique behavior. And because they're preying a lot on small reptiles, when they grab this lizard or snake, they basically beat it to death on the ground by grabbing it into their beak and slamming it on the ground over and over again. And they will not only do this to sort of like break the animal like down emotionally or mentally, just to get it to stop like fighting back, break its willpower and its ability to resist. But they'll also do it to break its bones and the other parts of the
I assumed it was more for killing it rather than, savoring its agony.
Well, I think I maybe described it wrong. I was thinking I should have used the word stunning the animal.
There we go. Yeah,
okay. I mean, who knows though?
No, that's
if a bumblebee can feel emotions, I bet Seriemas can too, and they delight in torture.
It's a great, it really does break the spirit a bit to be slammed on the ground over and over again.
For sure.
Sure.
If this prey, and they are hunting like primarily small things, so we're not talking about a bird that's jumping on the backs of maned wolves and trying to murder them or anything. They're catching little guys.
Sure.
And if the prey is too large to swallow, they will then like stand on it and like get it, pinned down basically. And they will use then their hatchet-like beak to tear it apart and shred it. Nice. And as much as they're able to just like hurl things at the ground with shocking velocity, they're also able to rip upwards with an equal ferocity that is once again pretty unique in the bird world. Like that sort of up and down, like just hatchet motion is wild.
Cool. Yeah.
So a lot of force goes into that like shredding of meat.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are there bills like specially adapted? Like what's the I can't picture the shape of a Seriema bill.
They're fairly flat, actually. They might have like a very faint hook. It's not like, I mean, they definitely have a hook on the end of the beak. It's nothing super spectacular. I'll show you. I mean, it's maybe more pronounced than something like a shrike would have. So, I mean, it fits in line with like that predatory bird shape you'd expect.
Yeah.
Sure. It's fairly long.
I feel like a secretary bird has a more hooked, traditionally hooked beak, right? Or no?
Yeah, a secretary bird has much more of like a hawk-like face.
Right.
And I think the difference is honestly just the length of the bill.
Sure.
So the fact that, the Seriema's bill is like more elongated before it hits that hook makes it seem, I don't know, like a less powerful long eagle beak, basically.
Sure.
It's not very wide. Yeah, what a pretty bird. Oh, so good. So good.
I have a sorry, I just remembered that I have a collection of drawings on sticky notes that of us being killed by various grassland animals.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And you did draw a picture of Nicole getting slammed by a Seriema headfirst into the ground.
I don't remember that. That's awesome.
I could go with the visual aid for this episode.
Yeah. Or was I prairie dogs and Rachel was Seriema?
I thought I was getting eaten by a prairie dog.
Oh, maybe.
And
I
then
don't
Rachel
know.
was getting eaten by a snake of some sort.
Yes, that seems right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Good
neither
stuff,
here
guys.
nor there. Just something I remembered.
Yeah.
Doesn't everybody have collections of their friends being gruesomely murdered by grassland animals?
Yeah.
On sticky notes on their wall somewhere.
Yeah.
Only the cool ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like the basics of Seriema. Their life history is not like super spectacular, so I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time just like basically reading their entire life history to you. What's far more interesting to me is how these things we've talked about relate to their ancestral terror birds and the ways that like both are informing the other in that sense. So let's talk about what a terror bird is and why that makes this extant bird, this bird that still exists today on the planet, so cool and unique. So how much do you know about terror birds?
They're big.
Yeah.
They
scary.
big.
That's like pretty much it.
And I would infer scary.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
There was one on Madagascar. At least
Ooh.
one.
Interesting.
I know.
We'll come
It's
back
really
to that.
weird.
Yeah, that is very weird.
Very weird.
Most of them, okay, so they, in terms of like time, existed somewhere in the Eocene to the lower Pleistocene. So they did exist for a period of time before grasslands existed, but they definitely existed into the formation of grasslands and spread during the formation of grasslands. So they have a little bit of a history there. They are also, almost all of them, extinct. And technically, while the Seriema is related to terror birds, it is not a terror bird. It's like in a sister tree in the same like little family. So they're related even though they're not technically like the true terror birds. And during this time when terror birds evolved, South America was basically an island that was completely unique to itself. There were no land bridges. It was isolated from placental mammals. And during the period after dinosaurs, terror birds were one of those groups of birds that continued to go on and not only thrive in the post-dinosaur world, but often fill the sort of ecological niche that was left behind by dinosaurs in this area.
Okay.
Very fun.
Yeah. So picture birds, from like Seriema size, like little, couple feet tall to like 10 feet tall birds. Just absolutely monstrous, living mostly in Argentina. We do have some fossils in Hawaii, Florida, and Texas, as well as some controversial remains in other parts of the world. And we know that they are very carnivorous. So again, this is a group of birds that was a running animal that was carnivorous and therefore filling a lot of those dinosaur niches. And we know that they're carnivorous not only from, evidence of the sort of forensic variety where it's like, oh, we can tell that they were like eating this animal because we found it like dead embedded in the animal, which is true. More on that later. But we also have found like fossilized pellets from them. So we have remains that they've coughed up like an owl pellet, basically. And so we can study what they were eating in that way too.
Nice. Yeah.
I didn't realize that like fossilized pellets were a really common thing in paleontology. Makes sense that they would be. But yeah, I was like, what? Pellet? How many pellets do we have from a lot? It turns out we have a lot of ancient bird pellets. So extremely carnivorous. And they came in two different types. There's like the type that you would think of when you think of a terror bird, which is like the big meaty-legged, huge animal with this monstrous head. Yeah. And then there's also like a more sort of dainty type of terror bird, which instead of having that like big chunky like dodo like head, I don't know, that's not the only Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, big
that's what I was picturing.
Yeah. It looks a lot more like something like a Seriema. So it looks more similar, and those are the more primitive types of terror birds. So really they ran the gambit in like size and in terms of like their flight capability and the way that they were specialized. So a lot of variation there. Two things that all terror birds have in common are, number one, they have completely akinetic skulls. I'll tell you what that means in a second. And number two, they have super weird pelvises. That's not what I wrote down, but like a unique structure in the pelvis that is basically like a running adaptation. Okay. So what does an akinetic skull mean? I'm glad you asked. Most birds can actually flex part of their face. Like their beak is capable of movement, and they can open their mouth a little bit on the top mandible. It's like picture a bird opening its mouth. It's not just like the lower hinge opening and closing. It is that the upper beak can flex a little bit, and that's reflected in the bones. So you can see that there's areas of the bones where it's like not really hinged, but that's a good analogy. It's sort of like flattened and thinned out, and so there's what they call flexion zones where they have some mobility.
Okay.
That's not true for terror birds.
Okay.
It is true for the Seriema, but it's not true for terror birds. That's one of the reasons why we know that they're like a sister and not a direct descendant. So basically, these things have giant, meaty skulls that can't flex, that makes their slamming their faces into their prey more effective.
So
there's multiple flexion zones around the face. They have really scientific names, so I didn't write them down.
So like what parts of the are we talking about? Like the palate, like what are,
the
like...
palate, the cheeks, there's like a nasal one maybe. There's like different zones in the face. And in terror birds, I think that there are no flexion zones at all. Like there is sometimes variation in how many flexion zones there are in certain animals. Certain birds rather, but in terror birds they have none at all, completely without movement or akinetic.
So I got you.
Also better for ripping faces off backwards with extreme force.
Nice.
Since they are applying such intense force to their skull, like what like do they have some kind of like
cushion for their brain?
Yeah, like I mean, like woodpeckers do,
Such
right?
A good question.
Woodpecker tongues, sort of
gross.
Well, they sort of encompass the skull and sort of create a little bit of a a buffer.
Yeah, no, that's a really really good question, and I either that hasn't been studied or it's not a structure that exists. Like I looked at a lot of studies there's one researcher named Federico or Dino DeGrange, and he studies a lot of things about the brain and senses of these animals and a lot about like the kinetic movements of these animals. Talked a lot in interviews about the way that what we know about how their brains function never mentioned any cushioning at all. So if there was something like that, it's either not known or it's not been studied. We have studied extensively, though, the kinds of forces that their skulls can withstand and compared it to other birds that are still alive, like eagles and seriemas. And we do know that their skull is extremely good at withstanding the forces and pressures of like up and down movements. So like pulling and smashing forwards, but very, very weak in side to side motions. So they can get like sucker punched in the side of their head and they'll be hurting, whereas they can sucker punch something else with the front of their face and they'll be fine.
Nice.
Sure. Okay.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, sure, yeah. I am so concerned about their brains.
I'm sure they're fine. Actually, their brains are apparently really good. We know a weird amount about their brains, which kind of throws me off a little bit because it's like we've studied so much about this animal that doesn't exist anymore, and we have so much to learn about this bird that does still exist. Plot twist, that is one of the points of my episode here is like we're studying so much about this fully dead extinct bird, and we're just now like in the last year learning why a Seriema has a sickle claw. Like what? Okay, anyway.
Gosh.
So that's their beak stuff. Okay. Unique structure in pelvis, just a fun thing. They basically have like an extra structure. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what it's supposed to look like, you know, like, so I don't know. Basically they have a sort of like a guardrail in place that keeps their femur facing forward and stops it from rotating out to the side.
All right.
Okay. So they don't like twist their leg in a weird direction.
Okay. And basically it keeps the legs pointing forward for a running gait and stops lateral movements. So it's really meant to maximize running forwards. Yep. And that's known in all terror birds. It's described as being very similar to something like a moa, which is another extinct, much more recently extinct, large ground-dwelling bird. Yeah. So those are the things that make you go, that's a terror bird.
Right. Huge meaty skull and guardrailed pelvis.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's 10 feet tall.
Well, not all of them. Some of them are little.
Okay. Well, it's pretty big. It's a big chicken. Yeah.
What was the biggest one?
Yeah, what was the biggest one?
They're just constantly finding new ones.
Those paleontologists.
There are several that are huge, honestly. As far as like, I think probably Titanus is the one everybody's most familiar with. I think that there's probably been more recently discovered ones that may be larger. But Titanus probably is the one you're thinking of if you're thinking of a terror bird in your mind. And then there's another one that's pretty commonly talked about. What's the name of that one? Kellenkin. Most of what we know about them is from bone records, so we don't have like a lot of other information about them. Bone records and pellets.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
anyway.
Okay. So their brains are fine, you're telling me. I can't get past this. Their brains are fine. Despite hammering them into living things on a daily basis.
Yes.
And just rapturously slamming their face against... okay, that's fine.
Yep, no, it's good. They have a brain that is really highly tuned to visual stimuli. So that's like one of the things we know for sure about them. They had like very active brains, which is kind of in alignment with the entire idea of the evolution of flight altogether, right? There's this idea that those fast-moving ground-dwelling birds being highly visual led to the sort of like flight-ready brain that we see in these animals. So that's consistent with how birds evolved. And these guys, you know, although a lot of them did lose their ability to fly, they still had that extremely active, visually adept mind, and all the features of those highly visual types of birds. I will say that they do have complete wings. All terror birds had complete wings. They're just a little bit reduced, and they're not just for displays like the way you'd think of an ostrich having wings just for displays. Like, all terror birds still have a keel and like flight muscles. Some of them just lost the ability to actually fly as like a derived feature. So some of them absolutely could fly, probably a lot like how the Seriema can fly today, which is not relying on it, but fully capable of doing it for small bursts of time.
That does make them infinitely scarier.
That some of them could fly?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't think the biggest ones, like the Titanuses and stuff, they probably, none of those ones could fly. But they did still also have like completely pneumatized bones. So their bones are hollow. They're just extremely dense and heavy. Hollow bones.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, because like, okay, from the like an evolutionary perspective, like that sort of coursing movement, sprinting along the ground, predates that is what predates flight and the development of wings. Like,
yes, the development of wings for flight. Yeah.
So they kind of piggybacked off of that movement because they already had like the hips were already like in the right position for running for a lot
for
of these
sure
things.
Yeah,
and
the bipedal movements, the running, it's been pretty well accepted in the paleontological community that before birds could ever fly, they had these extremely visually active flight ready brains that were ready to process that information and move quickly.
Do feathers predate flight?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, right. Because they're flightless. They're non-flying dinosaurs that were feathered.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right. And a lot of coverings on dinosaurs are outside of the bird lineages too. So, in fact, I think a famous paleontologist once said the question shouldn't be why didn't alligators develop feathers, but like why did they lose them? You know, like the genes for making feathers go beyond just dinosaurs even and into sister groups to dinosaurs like pterosaurs and other very ancient reptiles that are not at all dinosaurs.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, all the machinery was there before flight developed, and the terror birds as a group just lost the ability to fly and maintained a lot of those features that we see in those ground-dwelling hunting avian dinosaurs.
Nice.
And the need to chase prey and be like super responsive to the environment in that high, fast-moving sort of pace is something that's pretty unique. And we can absolutely see it in the brains of these animals. And the researchers who study terror birds like to point out that we really don't see anything in terms of this type of structure and lifestyle in the bird world anywhere except for the Seriema. So it's extremely unique. They also, I don't know how they know this, but Dino said that their brains are optimized for gait stabilization. I don't know how you can figure that. Yeah, I guess it's like the portions of the brain, I don't know, some sort of ancient forensics you can do to determine that the part of the brain that's there for like stabilization and stuff is really good. But
okay, yeah, sure.
I guess that makes sense if you're an animal that's like sorry, that was not good for an audio medium.
She is miming with her hand the motion of picking something up and slamming it against the ground over and over again.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Yeah. And then, finally, the way that they kill prey is extremely unique and directly relates to their living relatives. So these hatchet-like strikes and then extreme pullback forces, that's something that we really only see in this group of birds. And it's been described, this fast drawback motion is very much like a snapping motion that they were capable of. And importantly, it looks like the musculature of the neck and how that connects to the brain. No, sorry, the head. I was thinking about brains. Really isn't built for lateral movements. Like, they're not strong in like the way that their heads can rotate or move to the side. They're really structurally sound and strong at specifically slamming forward and ripping back.
Okay.
Super unique.
Yeah.
Good slamming faces.
It's just like it's like a very specific investment in one strategy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Indeed. Go
ahead. That is interesting to think about their musculature, because it is such, like, they have a long neck. Like, it's not like they're super beefy, like, you know, farther up on their necks. So interesting. You have to be selective.
But it's like you can see it in the skeletal structure.
Sure,
like the people who have like done these analyses on the way that like the motion must have happened based on muscle attachments. It's like specifically extremely robust in those two areas.
Yeah.
So why don't we have terror birds anymore is an interesting question. And why is the Seriema the only terror bird relative that still exists today? And that is highly debated. It's also even debated how long they lasted. So I mentioned that they definitely existed from like the lower Eocene to the lower Pleistocene. But that's pretty debated. Like, there's for example, there's a controversial fossil that was found in Uruguay that's possibly 17,000 years old, which puts it way earlier than like the 2 million estimate that we can safely say, like, we know for sure they were alive then. There's also a lot of controversial fossils in other parts of the world. Like, it seems like, you know, when the American continents connected, we maybe exported some of our terror birds not only to North America, but into Europe and maybe Africa.
Yeah.
But again, it's highly debated whether these are in fact terror birds or if they're just superficially similar things that share certain structures. And so that's pretty controversial, and there's evidence for both interpretations. But, you know, conservatively, they disappeared like 2-ish million years ago, if we're being safe. Of course, that might change as we develop a better understanding. And it sort of converges with when the continents connected. Okay. So the popular theory for a long time was that the placental mammals from North America came down and basically outcompeted these massive predators. And due to that competition, terror birds went extinct. But that's a weirdly simplistic view when at the same time it's also true that we had terror birds coming up from South America into North America, where, you know, home of the placental mammals, and doing extremely well for very long periods of time, and like, you know, hunting horses in Texas and having a great time of it, you know? So the timing is a little bit off, and it definitely seems like under some conditions they could absolutely compete with other predators. According to some scientists, the better hypothesis is that maybe they just got too specialized was the issue. And so their really specialized hunting techniques for specialized prey is what made that flood of new animals, you know, difficult to compete with. And the sudden changes that occurred when the continents connected made it so that suddenly a lot of them were going extinct. But yeah, we don't really know for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love when there's like one fossil found where we don't expect it, and it just turns everything on its head. Like,
it's so good. And when you have so few fossils to begin with, that makes it like especially interesting. Like we only have 2 fossil examples of what we'd consider to be actual like Seriema groups or like actual ancient Seriemas, and it looks like they haven't changed for a long time. So they've been pretty similar for a long time. But yeah, that's like 2 fossils that we have. We don't have a ton of terror bird fossils. There are some terror birds that we have. I think the most complete skeleton is like 80-something% complete. They're missing like some foot bones and like one of the hands or something like that.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Is there something about like the topography or like the soil of South America that makes fossils hard to find, or
I don't know. I honestly think it has to do with colonialism a lot and just the types of science that has happened in South America or not happened in South America.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know. And a lot of the fossils that we have that are fairly old, you know, they're found in museum drawers with notes like found this in this hill, and it's like, okay, well, like what strata, like where did this come? The 17,000-year-old one is like that, where it's like we just found this in a drawer with some very vague notes about where it was located, so we can't say with any guaranteed certainty like what age it was. So it's just I don't know that we have as many examples. Gotcha. And I don't fully know why that is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
We're also, again, just to remind you, just now learning things about the animals that still live there right now. So
Yeah.
And that's not, you know, for a lack of like work with these animals in South America. I think it's just that like the Western world is just now catching up and caring. And so that's why the Western world is just now finding out things or, you know, funding research and that sort of thing.
Well, it seems so strange to have the extinct species studied more than the extant species, especially since if it's like a modern analog for, you know, these like terror birds and things like that. Why is that, you know, why hasn't more time not been devoted to understanding the Seriema and then inferring about the terror bird from that, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It kind of blows my mind. Like, I know that there's been some old studies about like old as in like 2010, 2006 that looked at the skull structure like we talked about and whether it can withstand forces and stuff. But I wanted to talk about the sickle claw next because I think that's super interesting. And the use of the sickle claw in the Seriema was only just described January 2023.
Dang.
So literally like a month ago from when we're recording this right now. Or not, a year ago.
Yes.
Sorry, this month, a year ago
Yes.
is when they first published a description of how that animal uses its sickle claw, which like we've been talking about how velociraptors and Deinonychus and all these other animals, like every dromaeosaur that exists has one of these things, and a lot of other ancient non-dromaeosaur early birds has a sickle claw. And it's always been like, well, how do they use them? We literally have a live bird today that has one. Like it's they have one. Like how do they use it? We've only described it last year.
Weird.
Wild.
Isn't that crazy? Ooh, and the only way they described it, just to get a little rant here, was they went to some zoos in North America and worked with zookeepers in North American zoos to watch the behavior of how these things were feeding. They didn't even go to South America and actually study birds in the wild. They were just like, let's go to some zoos up here in Florida or wherever. I don't know which state it was in. Some American state.
Okay.
You know, like,
Wild.
What? Okay. Anyway, I'm getting heated. Study like ancient birds are super cool. I agree. Like I love ancient birds. It's one of my favorite topics. We literally have one here that's alive. Like let's learn everything we can about it. Oh my god. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, anyway, we did. So we do know some things about the sickle claw. Let me tell you about that because I think it's super cool. One of the things you should know, and I may have shown you a picture of it before. Here's like an example of what it looks like. You can see they call it the second digit. That's only because the one on the back that's like a thumb is technically the first.
Right.
Gotcha. So it's the inside claw, just like a dromaeosaur or a velociraptor or whatever. And it is sickle-like, extremely curved, perpetually sharp, and held up off the ground is what makes it a sickle claw. Now, the thing that makes it a sickle claw is a little bit different from dromaeosaurs because for them, a lot of it is like super hyperextended toe bones.
Mm-hmm.
These guys have a foot pad that holds it upright.
Okay.
So that's how they're able to keep it up off the ground anyway. And there's, again, been a lot of debate over how these things might have been used in ancient dinosaurs. So they all hunt on the ground, the animals that have this claw, especially the basal animals. So it's been theorized that it was used to gut animals, like Dr. Alan Grant said, to slice and tear. There have been hypotheses that it's used to hold down prey, like to pin and grasp prey. Really popular theory is that it was used like a grappling hook, which I hold on, stay with me. They don't mean that they like threw it across the room, but rather, you know, if you picture paleo art of Deinonychus or Velociraptor like animals jumping on a Triceratops or something, they might take those sickle claws to basically hold on and get a grip. Seems
like a good way to lose a toe.
Well, except if you think about like modern predatory cats and how they use their extensible claws, it's in a really similar way where they kind of like, you know, they can choose to extend it forward, which is the same as these birds, and they might use it to just grip and hold onto their prey while they take it out with their teeth or something.
Right.
And so the thought is that ancient and perhaps modern birds may have used it as a grappling hook to hang on to animals while using their teeth or hatchet-like beak to murder them. And this actually has some fossil evidence behind it, and it may still be true. For example, there is a terror bird that was fossilized in death with its sickle claw embedded in a protoceratops. Yeah, there is some fossil evidence for that. How does a Seriema use their sickle claw? They use it not to grapple snakes, but to pin it down. Yeah. So, and this is actually kind of cool. Like there's, in the study that was published in freaking 2023, they have like this photo where they show you that they've like hooked the claw around something to hold it down, which is kind of cool. I don't know why nobody'd ever observed that before.
Yeah, that seems pretty easy to observe. Like, we know how they hunt. Why do we not know how they eat? Like,
it's much easier to see a hatchet than to ask questions about their toes. I don't know, man.
Fascinating.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, they're in tall grass, you know, sometimes. So
I
you
guess.
just can't see their feet.
So
I mean,
just
that's a good
to
point.
pin and stabilize prey while they hammer it.
Yeah, well, they hammer or tear to shreds.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it is used primarily to restrain prey. I just want you to know that in the paleontological world, this hypothesis is called the Ripper hypothesis.
Nice.
Which is, Ripper stands for raptor prey restraint hypothesis. And they always make sure to put in parentheses, like, just so you know, it's pronounced Ripper.
They're so cool.
Some paleontologists say that the Seriema's sickle claw use is perhaps the best evidence for Deinonychus using the Ripper technique and other animals using it too. But, you know,
Yes.
could be multi-purpose too. Who knows?
Could be.
We can only guess with ancient birds and until very recently modern birds.
That's wild.
So terror birds, were they also, I mean, hunting, like what size prey were they hunting, terror birds?
I like little horses and stuff like that.
Just little horses. Yeah. just grappling little horses and then ripping them to death. Okay.
For sure.
Cool,
Yeah, they
cool,
were
cool.
hunting a lot of different mammal prey. They really kept alive that fear of large, terrifying bipedal feathered beasts
Sure.
that the dinosaurs
Naturally.
started. So
Okay. So the proportionally Seriema prey much smaller.
much smaller than the stuff other like large terror bird types were hunting. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Just
Yeah.
as like as a fraction or proportion of body size.
Yeah.
Terror birds were going for much larger things.
Yeah, in that example with the protoceratops, the animal that was hunting it, that terror bird was not like that much larger than it.
Yeah.
So
Dang.
yeah, pretty exciting stuff.
Really? Yeah.
And I don't think we know if they hunted in groups or anything like that. I think it's just conjecture. We also, interestingly, don't know anything about like parental care for terror. We literally have no baby terror birds preserved at all. No eggs, no babies, no like ontology at all. Did I say, is ontology right?
Yes. Oh. Recapitulates phylogeny.
Yes. Okay. My brain was trying to convince me that oncology was the right word, but that's definitely not. That's definitely a different thing that's in my brain. Okay, cool. Yep. Fantastic. So we don't know anything about how terror birds raise their babies, but just to keep the terror alive, as a final note here, how does the Seriema raise its babies? Well, like most birds, it, raises them in a nest and feeds them and stuff. But in 2021, again, very weirdly recent stuff, a wild Cerrado red-legged Seriema was observed with its brood of 3 murdering one of its own babies and then ripping it to shreds and eviscerating it to feed it to its 2 siblings.
Nice.
Just selecting for...
Heard a little cough. Was like, nope, none of that.
Yep, none of that. And like murdering like one of the young in your brood is not an unheard of trait in birds. Not, so it's like, this could be, we don't know. It's only been observed one time. So if it's a regular behavior, it could probably just be one of those situations like other birds that do this where brood reduction is conserving resources and ensuring the survival of the 2 strongest chicks, etc. But it is pretty terrifying to think that your parent could murder you and feed you to your siblings, then maybe snack on you a little bit themselves with its sickle claw and its hatchet-like beak. And whether or not terror birds also engage in behavior like this is impossible to say. So
indeed.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's why there's so few fossilized.
New hypothesis.
Yes. No juvenile fossils, because if you weren't cutting it, you got eaten immediately.
Indeed.
By your own parents.
Yes.
Was this a wild? You said this was an
observation
in the wild. Cool.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't think we count like captive observations as necessarily being wild behavior, but we did say that with the sickle claw. So,
yeah.
I guess it's different. I mean, it's more of a core physiological thing than a necessarily behavior, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not,
they probably eat the same in the wild and in captivity, but
it's not like they're going to come up, improvise a new way to use their claw to like, they use their sickle claw to tap on the glass of their enclosure to
to get more trees.
Yes.
Give me that alligator. I'm gonna throw it around.
Tap. Okay, interesting. Well, hey, that's just very pragmatic, infanticide.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can't fault them for it, I guess. Yeah.
That's very true. Well, guys, that is the Seriema. And terror birds.
What a fascinating beast. A reminder to all aspiring scientists that if you want to study dinosaurs, consider studying birds, because there's lots of birds that need more studying, and the birds are actually here.
Yeah.
We love dinosaurs. We love dinosaurs. We love paleontology, but there are birds.
Right.
They are dinosaurs. They're here.
Yeah.
They're flying around your house. They want to be known.
What? Hang on. Hang on. Let's go a step back. It is kind of wild to me. Like thinking in some sort of future world, like if this bird did go extinct, suddenly the entire world would be like, we have to figure out what it was doing. We have to know everything about it. Like,
yeah. What is the allure of like, oh, it's, trying to reconstruct the mysteries of the past, but it's like,
I mean, maybe that's it.
Why not just, how about we understand the present? The mysteries of the present are also compelling.
Maybe you feel less cool if you just watch something happen versus
make something up, possibly.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Make a good guess. It's not just making stuff up.
I guess if you study paleontology, you are, you can do so with a sort of objectivity of it being, there's no impetus to conserve the species or protect the species or use the information in a way that is going to, result in,
Yeah, it's just for like your own fun knowledge.
It's like biology, but purely theoretical,
Theoretical
like,
biology.
like ecology, but like, I don't have to think about
how sad it is that this animal's going to be gone in 10 years.
Right. Or we don't have to think about human impacts or like,
Yeah.
anything like that. It's just like, this is fantasy land without a landscape without humans.
Yeah, we don't have to think about big oil and gas and how we're going to plead for the survival of this species.
Yes.
Yeah. Very true.
Interesting.
Not that that's an issue for this specific animal. I don't.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't think that's.
Well,
one
they are
of its
Sahara
issues.
species, right?
Yeah. What does that mean?
I mean, there's pressures on the Sahara.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. It's more like soybeans and less like oil and gas. But
That's
yeah,
true.
for sure.
Equally insidious, the soybean. Well, Rachel,
Yeah.
fascinating information about a fascinating animal.
Thank you.
Listeners, I invite you to attempt to get in the mind of Seriema this evening. Hold down your food upon your plate with one finger and violently rip at it in an up and down motion.
With your teeth?
With
Yeah.
your teeth?
Oh,
That
Obviously.
might rip your teeth out.
Yeah.
What? What are you eating?
I don't know.
It
It depends on what you're
I think
eating,
if it's like
guess.
a corn on the cob, you can handle it,
I don't think I could.
How do you eat corn on the cob except for biting it and ripping it?
Slowly and carefully and without a lot of pressure and
No.
force.
Bite it and then rip back violently to tear the corn away.
Oh my God.
Not too many times in a row, though. You might bruise your brain.
I already lost
That's
one tooth to a Crunchwrap Supreme. I'm not going to risk it with a corn on the
weren't-
cob.
But you were just doing normal biting things. So, like, no
We don't know
proof
that.
that this Seriema
She might
way
have
of eating.
slammed that crunch wrap with her face.
Yeah, that's the untold part of the story.
Nobody else was there. You don't know.
Yeah. Terrific.
Can I just say? I looked it up just to make sure I wasn't I didn't hallucinate this memory. But even the Birds of the World page for the red-legged Seriema,
Mm-hmm.
very short. They don't even mention the sickle claw or anything.
Yeah.
That is incredible. Especially there, you will find Birds of the World accounts that are shockingly in depth.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that is interesting, and especially since the more you would think, the more conspicuous, the more wide ranging, the larger, the more charismatic, whatever a bird is, the better studied it would be. Not in this case,
Right. Yeah, which is wild, and I mean, the reason I didn't spend a lot of time talking about their natural history is because I didn't really find anything to be especially oh wow. It was just well, we sure know the basic facts about this animal. That's so weird to me. And I do want to impress upon you that this is not a rare bird. It's not threatened at all. Least concern. It's hanging out everywhere in the Cerrado and in other grasslands. It's so common. When I was in Brazil, we saw them eating pieces of bread out of somebody's back porch. They were just throwing bread out and was oh yep, they come by every day to eat the bread. And I was oh, that's a unique, quirky little thing that probably only happens here. No, it's so common that they mention it on the Wikipedia page. Oh yeah, people feed them bread and stuff, and they'll just come up to your house, and it's
Oh
a really
my
common
gosh.
thing that happens everywhere. It's this is people interact with them on a regular basis in a totally normal way. So
what if this is what if this is a jungle of the mind situation where it's we have an association of this, this cold, detached predator that is still a lingering evolutionary fear. We need to stay away from the Seriema.
maybe,
But it's just like a pigeon.
But it's a murder pigeon,
Yeah.
So it's something about that is uncanny.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know what else I wonder is how much of this is just nobody bothered to ask the people who live
Oh,
around
yeah,
them,
for
and
sure.
we're
Could
just
also be, yeah.
we discovered this new thing in 2023, and it's I'm sure if you asked
Yeah.
any grandma
Right.
in Brazil,
True.
who lives in the Cerrado, they'd be like, oh yeah, they use it to hang on to their prey. Like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
When I throw them bread, I see them use their sickle claw
they keep
to
it
pin
pinned
it down.
and
Yeah.
they rip it to shreds.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's that's a good point. Just
Yeah.
because it is undescribed does not mean it's unobserved.
Right, exactly.
By any measure.
But because it's like undescribed,
Mhm.
everybody acts like they have no idea what the hell's going on with this animal, and our articles about it are
Mhm.
abysmal. Anyway, that was just a little side note.
Side note received. Thank you. The
Yeah.
Best Biome is produced by our nonprofit Grassland Groupies, dedicated to educating the world about these beautiful biomes. We will be back in 1 month with another terrific and educational episode. In the meantime, write us a review, leave us some feedback, get in touch with us on the socials. We want to hear from you. And until then, farewell.
Farewell. Okay, here we go. I got this.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Best Biome, where we take a look. I know it's not right. That's fine. Who cares?
You could have kept going.
Okay. One more time.
I don't remember what it is anymore.
Hello from your favorite Grasslands
PR team. This week we're back. Okay.
Let's do that without shouting.
Yes.
All right. Good energy, though.
Thank you. All right.
Hello from your favorite Grasslands PR team. This week we're back with this month we're back with another episode.
We're having a week. It's a week.
Last chance.
Last chance.
Here we go.